In August 1914, the German Empire scrambled to defend its eastern borders. They mobilized the Silesian Landwehrkorps, an improvised formation of older reservists under General Remus von Vorsch. These were not elite frontline troops. They were aging men rushed into service to plug a gap. They marched eastward under the late summer sun, carrying 30-kilogram packs. With every step, stiff leather mobilization boots ground against the chalky loess soil of the Polish plains, turning the dirt into a fine, choking dust. But the High Command made a severe logistical miscalculation. Voisch's men were sent to war entirely without mobile field kitchens. For days on end, the men subsisted on dry hardtack and preserved meats. Without warm broth or hot meals, gastrointestinal illness tore through the ranks, causing rapid caloric depletion before they ever saw an enemy soldier. By the time they reached the front, the march had already consumed the physical reserves needed to survive the battle. The operational transition came as the exhausted troops crossed the freezing waters of the Vistula River, marching directly into the combat sector of the Austro-Hungarian First Army. The internal physical strain of the march was replaced by something new. Far off, heavy artillery shells pounded the earth, creating a low-frequency rumble that traveled through the clay soil and straight into the soldiers' bones. The Austro-Hungarian First Army pushed north, while the Fourth Army advanced northeast. Between them, a massive 50-mile gap tore wide open. For the troops on the ground, this empty space meant total isolation, scanning the unnatural silence for unseen Russian cavalry. That dread was justified. This photograph captures the overwhelming physical reality moving against them, massive columns of Imperial Russian infantry churning through the mud. The sweeping arrows on a general's map had translated into deep psychological terror and profound isolation for the unequipped soldiers ordered to hold the line. That quiet tension shattered at Wandzin Farm. The Russian vanguard made contact, instantly turning the improvised agricultural defenses into a slaughterhouse. The Landwehr possessed only rudimentary field telephones. Without reliable communications, they could not coordinate their own artillery to stop the attack. They were completely isolated under the incoming bombardment. This diagram illustrates the Russian 83rd Artillery Brigade's kinetic dominance. They unleashed a relentless barrage of high-explosive shells, hurricane fire, directly into the farm's thick masonry walls. These walls transformed incoming shells into high-velocity secondary projectiles, launching a deadly spray of stone into the defenders. The acoustic trauma alone was paralyzing. Sudden pressure spikes ruptured eardrums and caused intense, suffocating tinnitus. Soldiers were rendered totally deaf, cut off from verbal commands. At Wandzin, the stone walls meant to shield the infantry had simply transformed incoming shells into a more efficient way to kill them. Deafened and bleeding, the surviving infantrymen scrambled to the firing steps, trying to return fire against the advancing Russian skirmish lines moving through the rye fields. High explosive impacts pulverized the dry loess topsoil into a fine abrasive dust that saturated the air. This airborne dirt mixed with the standard weapon grease inside the rifles. It created a thick, grinding paste that seized the intricate firing mechanisms of their Mauser rifles, jamming the bolts tight. The environmental conditions had neutralized the basic tools of survival. To defend themselves, the soldiers were reduced to frantic manual labor, desperately wiping down rifle bolts with spit and greasy rags while under active fire. Despite the chaos, the Austro-Hungarian High Command, led by General Viktor Dankl, issued ambitious orders to push the offensive across the Por Brook. But on the ground, the advance was paralyzed. After days of continuous fighting and zero caloric intake, the soldiers were suffering from uncontrollable muscular tremors. Their bodies were failing. Heavy rains turned the clay into a viscous paste. Continually marching in waterlogged leather boots broke down the skin of their feet, causing it to slough off in wet chunks. Because the Landwehrkorps had deployed with almost no medical formations, there was no way to disinfect these wounds. Superficial injuries rapidly festered into paralyzing systemic infections. The infantry reached a threshold where human flesh could no longer absorb mechanical wear or obey a strategic command. The offensive died in the mud. Strategic momentum was crushed by the biological limits of the human condition. The campaign ended in a blind, disorganized night retreat. Men stumbled backward through knee-deep Loess clay, navigating by the hazy orange glow of burning villages. Tactical discipline dissolved. Deafened by artillery, starved, and physically broken, their survival was reduced to pure somatic reflex, following the physical tug of a comrade's sleeve in the dark. The maneuvers of the 1914 Lublin Campaign were swallowed by the clay, exposing the reality of the general's map, that fragile human flesh is the ultimate, inescapable vulnerability of war.